her Wi-Fi to work, and somebody else was closing on their house and was going to be on the phone, I think. So we're recording now, I think. Are we recording? Yeah.
Yes.
And so we took care of that, and I think I see 13 people here, so we'll wait a little bit more before we start. But that was a great conversation. Mary, did I answer the questions? Tom?
Yeah, that was very helpful.
Very helpful.
I'm glad we're on the right track.
Yeah,
You
me
are
too.
on the right track. Not yet, but you got to squeeze it a little bit more. You got to take the coal and squeeze it into the diamonds yet, but you're definitely in the right place.
Okay.
Then you got to walk it to the other side of the other half of your group.
Okay.
That's where it's going to get interesting, I hope.
Okay.
Okay, Steve O'Brien. Steve, did you hear yet? Up and down.
I think I don't want to, like, you know, I think so. I just still need to talk to Human Resources, and she said that should be this week, and then it would go to the board July 7th.
Excellent, excellent. Very good, very good.
Yes, thank you.
We got Tyler and Jean. Jean asked a very smart question before. I shouldn't act like I'm surprised, Jean. Where is everybody today? Don't they want to get in and get out? Let's see. And we have Sean. Sean, you need to talk to Mary's group, because we need to talk to me. Let's put it that way. Sean, I hope that you're there.
Yes, I am.
Okay. We'll chat, if not today, tomorrow.
No problem, Professor.
Okay. A lot of people missing. Well, I'll give another 2 or 3 minutes, then we'll go. You can't see what I'm doing. I'm a hypochondriac. In case I'm not sure if I told you folks that. I think I have every disease known to mankind. But every time I play golf, my pinky hurts, but it hurts a lot. So finally, I said to my wife, I think I have cancer in my pinky. So I went to the walk-in, and they said I have an infected cuticle. I thought women got infected cuticles. Is that being sexist? So I have my finger stuck in a cup of Epsom salts. I don't know what that's supposed to do. Frances is smiling. She's saying, he doesn't have to tell us that. You're blushing, Frances. It's okay. Yvette, wait, don't sell your house. I'll buy it from you. Where's your house? All right.
I'm actually buying a house in Port Jeff right now, and my other one is sold, but hopefully I'll close on the other one within like 2-3 weeks.
Oh,
One I own, so it's a little crazy.
best of luck. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Okay. I get to know Alyssa's okay now. Alyssa, I have one little issue with you, but it's not you, but I have to fix. I have you in the wrong team still. But what you did was fine. But you belong with the other team, with the world out there. All right.
So I'm still in Team B for Worlds Out There as the board president, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry about the mix-ups. I almost lost my mind Friday night trying to fix that chart. And
That's okay.
Mary took me off the ledge. All right, so we still only have 16 people are going to go. 1 minute more, then I'm going to take my finger out of the Epsom salts and get started. Hope everybody had a good closing. I sometimes call June the veneer month, or the lack of veneer month. When people come to school in September, everybody's kind of like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to, the kids are ready to work, learn, and the desks are all clean. Everybody's sort of ready to go. Notwithstanding the COVID thing that you all had to endure, and for which I applaud and admire one of you. But when June comes, the veneer comes off. People who would have smiled at the joke a month before that now start throwing their shoe at you. Parents start getting more cranky. It's a tough time of the year. Okay, we're still at 16. We're going to start. I'm going to share my screen in a minute. You are recording. Okay, you have the agenda in front of you. It's slightly different than the agenda that you had last week. Took some things out. I don't think I added too many things in, but I did take a couple of things out. So Tom already reminded me to record, so we are recording. Housekeeping and troubleshooting, we'll take care of it in a moment. Then we're gonna understand that one more time, understand what the 14th means. And I also have to add something in on the calendar for the 7th. And Tom, just remind me about that in case I forget when I get to that point. We're going to respond to the case studies. I think we'll do those first again. That worked well. I'm going to ask whoever is presenting to, if I start doing this, it doesn't mean I'm going to cut my throat. It means I want you to shorten it up a little bit, because I'd like to have a little more time to do some other things as well. No, I take that back. If I do that, don't pay attention. Just keep going, because those were too good for me to shorten up. So we'll ignore what I just said. We're going to talk about futures-based change leadership teams. I just met with Tom and with Mary from their group. It was an ELT team in group B, I think. And they were showing me some of the work they had worked on last Wednesday during their asynchronous time. And they did a really nice job at that. And but at the end of my sentences, I still had to squeeze them a little bit on the difference between goals and strategy. So it was a great conversation, because what they began to really tap dance around, not began to touch at, and I think they realized it before I did, that they were beginning to truly look at futures themes, multiple futures themes. And that's exactly where I wanted to take them. Then before I forget, Jean, I'm not sure what group Jean is in, but Jean asked a question that required my response, and so everyone who's on now should be listening to, and that would be that the generic template that I gave you in 2 weeks ago is satisfactory for most everything except for the $20 million piece. I mean, and what it really needs is an additional lens on that sample that I had you read, which has you more nearly recognize that what I need you to do is to think of that community after the pandemic, with the opportunity to spend $20 million to begin to change that district from X to Y. So I hope that you heard that, because that's pretty important. And I have to say that the group I just spoke to understood that very well. And Jean said she was going to carry it back to her groups. Now I'm sending it out to everybody else. So we're going to spend a little more time on futures-based change leadership themes. We're also going to continue to talk. We didn't talk about really, except for the great case study that Carla and her group did last week. Chase talked about equity issues there. We're going to continue to hit at that, and more next week on that, actually. I may skip 6 and 7, depending on how the time works, where you exchange, where I had you last week get into your book group, the book that you're reading group, and then to put you in heterogeneous groups to begin to share. And no, I'm going to do that, because although we had a heck of a time figuring out who was in what group, I think you got some good points off the ground on that. So we'll do that too. Then we're going to do phases 1, 2, and 3. I've been talking about 1 and 2. We're going to talk about 1, 2, and 3. By Wednesday, you will have, again, presuming that you're going to be meeting sometime this week with your teams, you will have begun to have worked on 1, 2, and 3. And I'll explain that more readily in a few minutes. In terms of materials, it's been all the material that you've had pretty much all along. I added a YouTube a couple of hours ago that's very brief, and we'll come to that in a moment. Okay, so any questions before I kick into the activities more specifically? Okay, activity-wise, I just want to go over one thing before we go to the case, case studies. I was saying to Tom, I thought Tom was going to yell at me, but Tom was too nice to yell at me. Mary, I thought was going to yell at me too. Mary, I didn't give Mary a chance to yell. Was that when Jamie a couple of weeks ago said, "Are we going to meet on the 5th?" And I said, "No, we're not going to meet on the 5th. That's the 4th of July, and we should be celebrating patriotic holidays like that." So we're not going to have a meeting next Monday, a synchronous meeting next Monday. So what I did was I interpreted the 5th as an asynchronous meeting, which doesn't mean I want you to necessarily give up the 5th if you're canoeing down the Pennsylvania Delaware Water Gap or something like that. But I do expect you to know that I'm calling the 5th as an asynchronous day. But then I realized that I didn't do anything with the Wednesday. The Wednesday was not there. Okay, so I just slipped in. You see number 4 there in yellow? That's a synchronous day. So it's flipping the day, asynchronous on Monday instead of Wednesday, synchronous on Wednesday. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it short, thinking of some of you may be actually canoeing down the Delaware Water Gap or wherever you're going to be. So what I'm going to do is give you time to work with me on your alchemy business and so forth, one-on-one or group to group with me. We'll do a little bit of that. The other thing I'm going to do is sort of call it as a wild card and say, pick a theory, any theory. So only because Alyssa catches my eye, not because I'm picking on Alyssa, and because Alyssa's sitting here like this and looking straight at me on the camera, and I'm going to say, Alyssa, what theory would you really want to know more about? I'm not asking you now, okay? But Alyssa says, Dr. B, I don't know, I think we're still kind of weak on communication. I said, okay, let's talk about communication. So we'll do a couple of theories that we either haven't covered as well as I would like to say we've covered, or a couple of theories we haven't even addressed yet. So that'll be a kind of a wild card. So it'll be alchemy plus it will be pick a theory, any theory. That's Wednesday the 7th. So there will be a synchronous class Wednesday. I know one of you has childcare issues that day. No need to tell me about it. You and I will figure something out. But that's going to be the meeting day. The synchronous day will be the 7th instead of the 5th, because quite frankly, I owe it to the university to clock 30 hours. I interpret how the hours are clocked, but I do feel the necessity to have roughly a 50-50 balance between synchronous and asynchronous. So that's what we're going to do. So know that we will have a class, an actual class on next Wednesday. This coming Wednesday, whatever date that is, at the 30th, we will be asynchronous. I'll be on next week. Last week, nobody got on, if I remember, until about an hour before the class, before I thought we were done. And suddenly I started getting phone calls, and that was fine. I was happy to talk to people who had the needs. The last class will be the 14th. Everything's going to be due the 14th, but doesn't mean that you're going to get a 0 if you give it to me on the 15th. It just means that's the last day of class. All right, in which case you're supposed to have prepared a slide presentation of your book. You're going to give it to me. We're not going to present it to the class physically. I don't think we have the time for that. We're going to debrief alchemy that day, which will take a pretty good chunk of time. And we had to finish the case studies, and I don't think I left anything out in terms of assignments. So the 14th is the last day. So it's just 3 weeks from now. This class is moving very quickly. All right, so before we get to housekeeping issues, also want to remind you that the assignment, which is connected to alchemy, is in purple here. You're going to give me, you're going to email an individual assignment to me. This is not a group assignment of about 2 pages, where you're going to identify and comment to the theories and concepts and things that you saw going on in the simulation. Whatever you think you saw. Okay, comment about them, whatever it is that you want to say about them. I'll probably give you a model about that before next week, but I'm really not interested in holding everybody's hand to the fire with a cookie cutter on that. I just want to hear what people think about the theories that they saw in actual operation during alchemy, notwithstanding the fact that you all have been expected to be experts on various theories and specialties as well, which should be part of that conversation. And then for you to comment, and again, this is Las Vegas, I'm not going to carry it back to your school district and say, North Babylon, this is what Mary said, kind of thing. But the question would be, to what extent do you view your school or district is disposed to adapting to or transforming from the pandemic issues? Basically, how prepared is your building and or your district to recreating their building or their district with the opportunity of $20 million or any money for that matter in a post-COVID world, hopefully a never again COVID world. Okay. All right. So those are things you've heard me speak about 20,000 times. I said it one more time. And again, a reminder that we are going to have a class, a physical class, a synchronous class next Wednesday, the 7th. Okay. And also, I guess about 2/3 of the class answered the discussion questions about the case studies. You did a nice job, but you are expected to PMI one of the case studies that was presented, and two, also, I just realized something, and two, I forgot what I was going to say. Basically, respond to the presentation. Oh, respond to someone else's comments as well. And I just realized that the people who didn't respond were the people who probably had presented and were not required to respond, per what Tyler kind of negotiated with me last week, and that was a good point. All right, so let's do case studies first. I'm going to go with Mary because I already gave Mary the co-host for her group, and then we'll go to the second group. I don't know who that group is, but I'm sure we'll figure that out in a moment. So, Mary, as soon as you're ready.
So we have a little issue. Obviously, Callie's internet isn't working, so it's just Chris and I presenting it, but Callie obviously did a lot of the work for it, just so you know.
Okay, now she was the person who got online and told me that her Wi-Fi wasn't working, but I didn't know it was Callie. Callie, I'm sorry, I didn't really recognize it was you. Okay.
So I'm just gonna, so I think you have to stop sharing your screen. I'm just gonna preface our project by saying we're really gonna ask for your feedback and input because this is a it's a very interesting situation. And we are looking for like a variety of possible solutions. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and turn it over to Chris. Can you guys see it?
Yeah. I'm just standing in to put my air conditioning on. Be right. I'm here. You can hear me.
All right, so the title of the case study is "Everyone's a Racist," which might not make sense at this second, but it will very quickly. And I'm going to go to the next slide.
All right, so we just wanted to start off by giving you guys a little sort of summary about the district that this case study is taking place in. So it is a suburban school. It is a Title I district with 40% of the student population on free or reduced lunch. Over the past 15 years, there's been a dramatic shift in the demographics of the school district. The majority of the staff are veteran teachers. Only 10 of the, I think that was 10 of the 70 teaching less than 5 years. So it's a lot of people who have been, basically they're tenured teachers. They've been there for a long period of time. They're well into their careers in this district. And the population has changed drastically, but the teaching staff has not. So the teachers have largely started to differ from the student population. The issue is not seen in any of the other schools in the district, but it's pronounced in this particular building. And the majority of teachers in this building are white. And you have a principal who we are saying is authoritarian. They have 20
Or was authoritarian. Yeah.
Was authoritarian, and has over 20 plus years experience. This person's retired 5 years ago, and then there's been 2 new principals and 4 different APs since that time. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about the demographics on that slide too, and I think it's on this slide as well. So as far as the current issue in the district, the state has cited your district because of the disproportionate amount of students of color, majority male, who are failing. And they are willing to provide training and professional development to the staff to assist. And we included this chart on the bottom to kind of give you guys an idea of how the demographics have shifted in this district. It was once a district with a majority white population, but you can see here it's now very evenly divided. You have a Hispanic community that's making up about 30% of the district, an African-American population that's about 30% of the district, and then the white population of the district makes up about the 40% remaining. But if you look at the failure percentage, you could see that they're way off balance. You could see that the 40% of the failures are being made up by the Hispanic community, another 40% by the African American population, but only 20% of the white population, which was the largest percentage, but a much smaller percentage of students failing.
So I'm gonna type, and either you guys can post stuff in the chat, or you can just like unmute and say things out loud. But we're looking for like possible solutions. So we can start easily from administration. If you were an administrator in this building, what would you be doing to try and bridge the achievement gap? I'll give you guys like a couple of minutes to organize your thoughts, because I know that's a lot to ask very quickly. So take like 2 minutes and try and think of a response. You can type it in the chat, or you can just call it out. And I'm gonna type our responses on here. And that's what we'll do.
I would present that data to the staff, knowing I'm gonna get pushback, but I would present it anyway.
So let's do this. Let's say you're a staff member on the, in this building, and you know that this is a problem. What might be something that you would do? I think people are posting in the chat. So let's see. Definitely needs to be more PD. I agree with that. Actually, it's not gonna let me do that, so I'm just gonna type it. Okay, so for PD. Okay. Okay, so from a staffing standpoint, hire teachers read. Oh yeah, please, Yennefer. Or like, for example, if you were like, let's say you're on the school board in charge of this district, like what would you be doing as a school board member then? Okay, so there needs to be research.
Maybe take a look at the curriculum. If the curriculum is
Okay.
not, if the curriculum or the practices of that curriculum is not meeting the needs of those students, meeting the needs of the students.
Okay, so we have like, we should be looking, okay, so I think, Dr. B, I'm gonna have that be the last thing I write down here. And it's possible like you need to share the data with them, all right? Right, so share data and give clear guidelines. So obviously there's a lot of different people involved in this that can do things. Like staff can look over their curriculum, as a couple of people said, and review to see where the deficiencies are. Administration should be able to present this data to the staff, should be able to offer some information and give more professional development. And the district as a whole might need to like research how the other schools have handled this issue, since this school that we're talking about is the only school in the district that is currently having this issue. So outsourcing to the other districts, the other schools in the district makes sense. So here, and this is a maybe an exaggeration of something that happened in my district. So I'm going to tell you what did happen. So the school presented one data point, just demographics and how they like who was failing, and that's it. They didn't include absences, suspensions, economic status, none of it. And the staff reaction was wildly different. They were broken into small groups, and in some groups they admitted that racially motivated issues were coming up because of hidden biases, and some meetings were defensive and aggressive. Administrators tried to portray the failure rate as solely based on race and the innate racism of the staff instead of having this data to analyze. Therefore, the teachers were resistant. The meeting was on short notice, it was after school, and it ran over time, which doesn't seem like an important piece of information, but if you are bringing your staff in to talk about their own biases and their own issues, and then you hold them over time, so you're calling them names and you're holding them over time, the reaction to that was volatile. The data that the staff then requested was not available, and the administration also kind of became defensive when the staff brought up other issues. They had wanted the staff to identify racism as the issue and were not happy when other elements were brought in. So this is not a new issue. They had become angry or aggressive about topics to this similar in the past, something that the administration knew. A male staff member yelled at an ENL teacher presenting information on helping immigrant students. He was temporarily suspended, but he did come back to school, and the ENL teacher almost immediately quit. So it is a hostile environment when it comes to issues with racism and race. So this situation set a precedent for other racial outbursts, which was seen in some of these breakout rooms. There was no follow-up conversation about the data. It was very simply, they attempted to show the data, and that was it. So knowing that they tried to represent this data, and it came up in the way that I just described, like, where do you go from there? How do you get your staff to address racial issues when they have felt like targeted, insulted, and devalued?
You know, I'm thinking of and it's going to sound like I know more about it than I actually do. I'm thinking of a doctoral student I had a couple of years ago in a district, who's from a district that had some of the same things you're talking about. And apparently that district had brought in, and sometimes it's a four-letter word, but here it comes, consultants from another state, actually, who ran a program called Courageous Conversations. And from what I understand from this doctoral student, who did his doctorate on it, actually, that program had a process where, and we've used this word a few times, where the faculty and staff needed to learn how to dialogue, to use a Senge word, among each other to understand these issues and to drill down to the root cause issues, and then begin to evolve some organic from their soul, S-O-U-L soul, from their navel responses to what the issues seem to be. The story, and the true part of the story is that they didn't finish it. The community pushed back, and they never finished the process. And I don't know where that district stands with all that now, but that's an unfortunate story based on what this person's research was. So really, what I'm driving at is something that sounds like courageous conversations, where staff members, community members learn how to really. This is not the correct verb. It's the first verb I can think of, and it's really not a good verb. So remember that when I say it. Confront each other, not a good verb. Understand each other, dialogue with each other to really scrape away some of the ostensible mental models that are doing nobody any good.
I did that training. Courageous Conversations. I did it.
I'm sorry.
New York City is doing that. It's Patricia.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, I did the training, and I thought it was very impactful. I really liked it, and we had to keep doing it, but then COVID happened. But I did 2 weeks of PD on it. It was pretty intense. I missed 2 weeks of teaching to do it.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And your school was like content to bring you in a sub for those 2 weeks to do this?
Yes, there was 7 of us, and she was doing it in groups. Every single staff member had to participate. It wasn't optional. And there was a lot of pushback, and it was very, very intense. And there was one point that I even had to come home with a survey. My husband's a white Jew, and I'm Hispanic, and I had to interview someone of a different race or a different, somebody that was different from me, I guess. And I interviewed him, and it was incredible how his results and my results were so different on how, you know, we deal with racism in the world and growing up. And so we got to see those numbers. It was pretty intense.
And when you say there was pushback from your staff, like in what way, if you don't mind me asking?
Teachers felt like, for example, so the group that I went with, we were all Caucasian. And one of the for example, one of the comments, so we went with other schools in Staten Island, and one of the comments that was made was that white people wear Uggs and Black people wear Jordans. And as silly as that sounds, all of us from my school, all 7 females were in this meeting wearing Uggs. So when we left, they all took it very personal. It was just, people were taking things a little too personal. But I thought it was a wonderful learning experience. And I think that if we can't look at ourselves, there's no way we can bring that to the classroom as a teacher. If I can't see the problem, then I'm not going to be able to teach tolerance in my classroom. So it really needed to start with the staff.
Wow.
So the idea of like taking things personal was a big issue here. A lot of the staff felt that they were targeted, which if you start to talk about race and racism, a lot of people immediately say, well, not me, I don't do that. Because that is something that no one wants attributed to them. Without acknowledging the fact that like, if you're raised in a systemically racist society, you have racism ingrained into you. It's active choices you make to be different.
Right.
And
I think, so they
yeah,
told,
sorry.
one of the things, just to give you an example, one of the things that, and as for myself, it was hard, but one of the things that they had said is, if you feel like you're a minority, stand up. And I stood up. I have immigrant parents. Spanish is my first language. They told me I had to sit down.
Why?
So I wasn't allowed to categorize myself as being a minority because my skin is white, because I don't look like a minority. So that was hard for me to walk away. Like, I walked away with a lot of reflection and very enlightened, and and I didn't like it and I took things personal, but I definitely walked away learning something. It made me think, and there was pushback, and there's no way that all these teachers that are pushing back are not thinking at the end of the day. And one of the cool things that my principal did is that she gave everybody a journal, and she told us every day, every time we have these courageous conversations, because we were having them every Monday, we have staff meetings or PDs, and she would ask us to journal how we felt. It was just for us. So it was, and I think it was a way for us to kind of, instead of pushing back towards each other and being angry at each other or taking things personal, she wanted us to jot it down and journal it, and I guess get our emotions out like that so that we wouldn't be frustrated. It was an option. I thought she tried.
So like the idea of offering like self-reflection as a way to cope with this. Yeah, I think that's a good part of this that wasn't seen like in our case study. I mean, it happened in my school, but like in our case study is there was no opportunity for people to reflect. They were told, this is what's going on. This is how you contribute. They weren't allowed to like interact with that. So their immediate response, and I was in a breakout room in which people got very angry. There were some other rooms that people did not, but I only can talk about what I saw. And it ended up with the administrator facilitating our group, kind of just throwing her hands up and being like, you guys, we don't have more data. I have nothing else. I don't have more data to give you. So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about this data point. And pretty much immediately, she was met with severe resistance.
I think it really needs to be thought out. It's a very sensitive topic. I think that you have to be prepared for that. I think as an administrator, you have to be prepared for pushback. And
the real B&H customer story. Fred Smith, fitness instructor.
Does anyone else have any had any experiences with this when you were forced to address like some sort of bias in your teaching and like the process you went through to handle that?
Well, I'll share that. My superintendent recently sent an email out about implicit bias, and kind of stating that in that email she said and you may not think you have implicit biases, but everyone has them. And in my building, it caused a little bit of outrage because it was like, I am not biased. Like, it wasn't even, like I think it became very like that person, a few people took it very personal, and they were like, you can't just assume that I'm biased. And I'm like, okay, but at the same time, like, I've seen you or heard you say biased things. And then when I did say that, it turned into like an even bigger argument. But I think a lot of people are very defensive about that because, it is seen as something negative when you're being biased. But, my point is like, listen, sometimes you can have implicit biases that could potentially help, a particular group. Not all implicit biases are necessarily negative. Sometimes we just have an implicit bias about, a certain group of people, and it's a positive association with that group of people. But that person did not see it like that. So I think that this topic is definitely very sensitive, and I think a lot of people are extremely reluctant to talk about it, even to their children at home or to their students in a classroom, which makes for, makes it very difficult because, you don't, how do you cross that wall? How do you overcome that?
Well said. Lynn, right?
Yeah, so we this year my school was, so I'm in a predominantly white district, many of you know at this point where I work, with predominantly white students. A few years ago there was like a petition from a few Black students that had graduated, just kind of identifying and labeling all of the bias and like in teaching and in our school. And so our school is, beginning to take steps to address that. But one of the things they did this year was put together like a DEI course. And the course itself was actually beautifully done. They connected with a lot of like community outreach programs and had a ton of people come and do trainings for us over Zoom. But the issue sort of with it was that it was by choice. So it was an elective, you could kind of choose to do it. So similar to the way things like that always happen, it ended up really being the more open-minded teachers that probably are a little bit more aware of all of these things anyway, that were the ones that went and attended the training. And maybe some of the teachers who do have a little bit more bias in their teaching are the ones that chose not to go. So, we're now starting a committee for DEI and making plans. And one of the things that our group keeps talking about is like, well, like we need all staff to be on the same page before we can kind of start with anything. And I felt like, and Jennifer, how you kind of said it, like if someone just shot me an email and said like, you're implicitly biased, I would have been like, hey, well, yeah, sure. But like, let's, take it easy. But they did such a good job of kind of building that for us, starting with like history, and like they did a whole timeline of like oppression of all different races and backgrounds before they kind of built us all into, now let's start working on identifying your own privileges. Now let's start talking about what this means for you and how that becomes bias. And they really did a beautiful job. But if that's not given to everybody, like we went to a faculty meeting a couple weeks later, and it was like half of my staff was making comments that I was like, oh my gosh, if you were just in this training, you would like maybe have a mirror right now that like you're not even able to see that the words that are coming out of your mouth are so biased. But like I'm saying, like it's not your fault. Like I wish you were there, and I wish you heard the same things, and I wish you did the same, like I guess learning that we did through that course. But so we're kind of in like a funny spot, but that's my experience.
I guess that's the problem, is like you need everyone on board, but some people are going to be dragged behind, like kicking and screaming. And it's kind of like, how do you make this authentic and self-reflective and helpful while also handling people that very much want no piece of it? Oh, sorry, Professor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to piggyback off what Lynn was saying. I think I said this to you maybe in the first semester of the course. I just wanted to remind you that all of you are in this leadership program training to become ologists, social scientists who happen to be specializing in leadership theory. But all of these other ologies apply. And in this case, what Lynn just brought up is an indirect example of sociology. Now, if you hear what Lynn was saying, Lynn, if I misrepresent you, stop me. That for some reason or another, the principal said it's an optional course. I could speculate about why she decided to do that, and it might have even been a politically smart thing to do, but maybe not. I don't know. That's another conversation. And by the way, when you do your research course, some of you may want to really tackle this issue for your own muscles insofar as how you look, not only for potential doctorates, but for your own ability to represent yourself as someone who's really thought these issues through as you present yourselves for interviews for positions. But what I wanted to use the term was, and I'm pretty sure I've mentioned the author before, Malcolm Gladwell. He's written a number of books. He's a sociologist, and he writes in a very conversational tone, so a lot of non-sociologists like to read him. And he wrote a book called The Tipping Point. And the tipping point is exactly what it sounds like, which is to say that something could be kind of a small idea or a small fad that suddenly erupts into something that everybody wants to do or buy or sell or be part of. So what I think I'm hearing Lynn say, at least now, this could change, Lynn, but I think I'm hearing Lynn say is that the tipping point among your colleagues in the faculty hasn't been reached yet. And perhaps what the principal, either consciously or subconsciously, is hoping to have happen is that the weight, the WEIGHT weight of this kind of what those of you who participated in this kind of course will kind of overcome the negativity of those who did not, and spread that out. And there's a lot of value to that. I have a saying, I should copyright or make a bumper sticker out of it sometimes. Organic over inorganic every time. Organic always has more power than inorganic. But organic has its drawbacks because it takes a long time for a lot of organic things to happen. So it's possible, pay attention to that, Lynn. That might be interesting up the road. And remember the point, I'm using the term twice. Remember the point, tipping point, when you hear about these kinds of things, because this is an issue that all of you are going to need competencies in as you enter your leadership positions.
So we didn't want to make the presentation too long because you were telling us at the beginning, if you do this, you got to cut it off. But I do have one more question for the group. So keeping in mind that last bit of information I gave you, which was there have been racial issues in the school before. And I'll summarize a couple more. A security guard was fired for some racist remarks. A teacher was fired for calling a student a Nigerian monkey. The staff had just spent a lot of time with a white authoritarian principal, and the data about how the district has changed over time wasn't presented to the staff. All that was presented was, this is how many students are failing and these are their demographics. Knowing that the staff had racial issues in the past and and had outbursts and anger when racism and immigrant students and things like that were called into question, what should have been the first step the administration took before doing this training? Keeping that in mind, how does that change how this should have run? I'm asking because I have no idea. No, I mean, I have some guesses, but I am it's hard, I imagine. Steve?
I have so many thoughts and I'm agreeing with all the points. And it seems this is a huge issue that we have to tackle. And the first thing that I think is starting small. This is really, and this goes back to me, Tyler, and Jennifer's presentation. These are tough conversations, and we're living in a time right now where we need to have them more and more. And to be honest, I know we're all here and, we're educated and we're in these programs where we can have these conversations, but the people that work in our buildings may not have these types of conversations. I was with a group of friends this weekend who even have family members who don't really have discussions like this. So I really think it just comes down to training and taking it small in your building and teaching everyone how to have tough conversations. And you could start small. You don't have to start with race. Maybe you could say, let's have a fun thing and debate your favorite type of cereal or something. And just Dr. Bernardo before made a point when he was talking about Lynn, I want to piggyback off what Lynn said. I think we need people trained to talk like that when you are having a controversial conversation. You want to acknowledge everybody that you're talking to, or if you disagree, let's, talk, point out something that you agree with first before offering that disagreement. I think that is at the crux of what needs to happen. And if I'm rambling, I apologize.
No, you're not actually. I'm gonna ask if training in collegial discussion. Like that's kind of what you're talking about. Like people need to be given the opportunity to have discussions collegially without something as emotional as race
Exactly.
is the topic.
Because
That
that's what
makes
we teach our kids. We teach our kids accountable talk, and I feel we need to do the same thing with adults.
See, I thought that the district or the administration not addressing the racial issues that have happened in the past sort of degraded the training even more. It was like that article from last semester, the non-discussables. Like they did not want to talk about the fact that racism had been such an issue. And therefore, when they started a conversation about race, no one was really prepared to handle it because in the past it had been pushed to the side and ignored. So it was a big ask of the staff to be able to switch gears like that. So does anyone else have any other comments? I don't want to take up too much time. I'm talking so much.
I think that part of the problem too, like you said before, is that just that one data point was really presented and, it wasn't really explored. There weren't other things discussed or examined where I think as if, the administration had presented, this is an issue, let's come together and see if we can figure out why this is happening without putting, without kind of on the attack initially, because, you're all racist. Doesn't mean it's not a problem, but I think maybe people might have been more receptive potentially to a conversation had they not been put on the defensive right away.
I agreed with you when we were discussing this case. I was like, the presumption at coming at your staff and saying, you're all a bunch of racists, you're all contributing to this issue, and not pointing the finger in the mirror at administration first before you come at your staff is like the wrong way to go about it. I feel like if I worked there, I would be looking elsewhere. Like I don't know. There's such like a toxic approach to the way they come at the staff in your building. It's unbelievable.
I also think the problem is in other discussion rooms, there was a facilitator or a group of people that were able to handle the conversation. But I think the groups were created randomly, and I don't think they took into account the different personalities of the staff. So how did one group end up with 4 people who are vehemently against talking about this? Like you should know your staff. You should have a handle on them. So if you know you have for example, like that one staff member that screamed, and I'm not kidding when I say screamed at an ENL teacher about how like immigrants need to learn the language. He shouldn't have to adjust what he's doing to teach them. It's un-American, it's ridiculous. Like why would that person be placed in a group with someone else that might mirror that energy? Like, wouldn't you make the decision knowing your staff to be more intentional? And that was another thing that I thought they didn't do, was just acknowledge your staff members as individuals. Instead, like you said, it was everyone's a racist, everyone's contributing. And obviously they did not say everyone's a racist. Instead it was phrased like, we all have implicit bias, which if you're on attack, they translated it into you're a racist.
Okay, just two quick points. A great conversation, wonderful conversation. I was so happy to hear that Patricia had some experience with the Courageous Conversations to add to that, because everything I knew about Courageous Conversations I said. I'm glad you could add to that, Patricia. Think of yourselves as potential leaders, and think of this. I have a lot of C words. In this case, the one C word I want to run into is not the culture word this time, or the communication word so specifically, but the capacity word. The capacity, the ability to have that kind of conversation depends on, it does not come naturally. And as we hear, when you read about Stephen Covey, who we spoke about last week, about seeking first to understand before being understood, is a tough skill to learn. And that's why sometimes I don't like to use the word discuss. This is really me mincing words. In my mind, discuss reminds me of, so did the Yankees win today? What do you think? Oh yeah, well, you know, got to get rid of Boone and yada yada. And it's just it's a conversation. It's a discussion in my mind is better described by a dialogue where people are hearing each other and coming to conclusions and exchanging and responding to each other, which is different from how I see a discussion. That's just me mincing words. But in the end, and it's a rhetorical question, don't answer it out loud. You're all princes and princesses right now, and I'm not being a sexist when I say it in that capacity. Where I put the pea under your mattress and I'm irritating you tonight and asking you to think about how you would approach getting this process to be embedded in with the power of the capacity to have a dialogue. Because if they don't know how to talk to each other, you're going to have the kind of issues that Mary is describing, and I'm sure others of you have seen as well. Nice job, guys. Okay. Anything more, Mary? Am I rushing you? I'm not rushing. You can go as long as you need to go.
No, I think that was it, unless anyone, I think, just to reiterate again, I think Lynn's point was really great. You need to like build up the skills. You can't just throw people into the deep end and say, well, it's your fault, you're drowning. Like you have to handle your staff as humans, humans with, you know, without sometimes not enough self-reflection. So, but that was it. Unless Chris or Callie have anything they want to add. I feel bad. Callie did a bunch of work and then her internet just said no.
National Grid changed my meter and my piping and snipped all the Optimum cable under the ground. So that's what happened to me. But it was just interesting. You talked about like how your admin changed, I'm sure, like 20 million times in like 3 years. You've had like 2, 3 principals, 2, 3, 4 APs. Like there's not consistent leadership. And just my 2 cents on this whole thing, I think that plays a significant role to the detriment of your culture of your building, because these problems don't exist in her elementary schools and they don't exist in the high school, which says volumes about the leadership within that specific building. And it's a shame on the district office for not picking up on it, to go in and, you know, swoop in and help the team, in my opinion, at this point. You know, that's my last 2 cents. And then he has 2 cents too.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, great job. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased that this topic, piggybacking on for what last week's group did as well, is still ringing your bells, and that's great, because it's the equity issue is the issue of the 21st century. I don't say too many things arbitrarily. Write that in the back of your hand. The equity issue is the issue of the 21st century, in my mind, and other researchers' minds, who are a lot smarter than I am. Okay, who's next? Which group goes next?
I think we do.
Jean. Good, Jean. Thank you. You wanna go? Let me give you your co-host.
Actually, if you give the co-host to Jamie, that would be better.
I'm going to do it right now.
All right,
Jamie,
thank you.
Hanik, right? Hanik?
Yep, Hanik, yeah.
Hanik, okay.
All right, Jamie is the co-host. Go, Jamie.
You guys see this? Good?
Yes.
Sorry.
It's a similar topic.
Okay.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah. So I'm gonna get us started. So yeah, similar topic, racial inequity. So some background on the school district. So it's a district on Long Island. Estimated median household income, 200,000. Population is 5,000 of the community. And then and of that, 2.6% is living in poverty. And then of the school district, there's 1,700 students in the district, 87% are white, 1% is black, 5% Hispanic, Hispanic or Latino, and 5% Asian or other Pacific Islanders. So pretty white. Yeah.
Sorry.
So basically what happened was there was a petition that was created. It was created on change.org, and we'll get into a little bit more about the petition later, but the title was Anti-Racist Education and Policy Enforcement. And it was sort of against the school district in general. Former students who had attended the school district, they felt like the school had done a poor job addressing racial issues, both like at the country level, the school level, within the community, because even though, the population obviously is mostly white, it's not 100% white. So they just felt like the school did a pretty poor job of addressing sort of any racial inequity, racism, and all in all, there was quite a large signing of the petition. So I'm going to go to the next slide. There were 7,051 people that signed this petition. It was both people in the community, students, came together to sign this petition. And just to remind you, there were 1,700 students in the district. So, I mean, it's a pretty big number considering it's a relatively small district.
So the petition called for developing a zero tolerance policy of discrimination, racist jokes, discrimination related bullying, addressing the fact that racial discrimination has happened at various schools within the district. So they wanted the district to address that. Hiring more people of color, which is something that we talked about in the last presentation, including more diverse literature and lessons into the curriculum, calling for the implementation of semi-annual assemblies, gatherings, and events that focus on lessons about racism and discrimination. So we did a Padlet. If you could participate, please. What do you think the district should have done or should do to address it? I think we can put the link in the chat.
Yeah, I just have to stop. Nice. Can you do that? I have to stop my screen share. If not.
Yes, I got it.
Thank you.
I did it. I didn't know how to do that. Now I know how to do it.
I'll give one more minute and then I'll click the link.
Okay, the link is in the chat.
Oops. Patricia, we can't hear you.
Sorry. So we have some responses. The district needs to acknowledge the petition as a starting point for change. The district should meet with creators of the petition and develop a beginning committee with them to start the conversation. That's a great idea, to actually meet with the people that started the petition and everyone that's signing the petition. Should probably respond to the petition in a public way as a short-term response. Others said, I think after reading that petition, I would probably start to inquire with the staff and see what their thoughts are. I am thinking maybe surveys, brainstorm ideas. I definitely think the staff should be involved. Let them know what they received. I'll let the staff know what they received in the petition and make an effort to start making changes. Create a committee open to all. The district has to respond to this petition with a plan.
Okay, I'm gonna hop back.
Great.
Okay, so here's kind of what happened. Directly after the petition came out, the superintendent shared a letter with the community. And just to give like a brief overall, I'm not gonna read the whole letter. It just says that, these testimonies were really difficult to hear but they are going to take this as an opportunity to ensure moving forward that no student ever feels this way again. They go on to state that no matter skin color, religious background, or sexual orientation, students should be treated with respect. Also, Also, lastly, stating, they were going to put resources on the website for parents to take the time to talk to their children about this. As you could, there was no apology to the students in this letter, or there was also nothing, they didn't say any, moving forward steps, what they're going to do. So after this letter was sent, the head of HR interviewed every student who wrote the petition or anyone who signed it who would be willing to talk to her. She really wanted to learn how, the students felt or how the people felt who signed this petition. What she found out was interesting. A lot of the white students reported that they didn't feel prepared when they entered college. They didn't have any knowledge about other cultural backgrounds and felt very ignorant into the real world. And a lot of black students reported experiencing racist comments at schools, teachers looking the other way. They felt that their culture wasn't taught or represented in the curriculum. So like we said, the superintendent wrote a letter. A 6-week diversity, equity, and inclusion class was provided to any teachers who wanted to participate. So it sounds familiar, like Lynn was talking about, it's the same thing. What was surprising about that is a lot of teachers did not participate in it because it was optional and it was after school. So, I don't think they got the turnout maybe they wanted. And from this, professional development, a DEI committee was created where, I'm on the committee myself, and we've met about one time and really taking the steps about looking at curriculum, who we could bring in. So, they're taking the steps. It's slow, but there is a lot of worry by people on the committee that there is going to be backlash from the community once this gets up and running.
So yeah, to kind of jump on that, where it seems like they are now, the diversity committee is expecting pushback both from the staff and I think maybe a little bit from the community too. They're not really sure how the community is going to react, parents and things, when these, curriculum changes or different initiatives are introduced. The goal of having people of color and hiring more people of color has kind of fallen flat because they're not getting applicants of, people of color. It seems to be mostly white people who are applying to work in this district still. Like Lynn and Jamie mentioned, the teachers aren't taking advantage of the 6-week course. It wasn't required, so it was not a big turnout. And then one of the things that really stood out to me when we first were talking about this is that diversity committee that was formed, even though it was students and former students who generated the initial petition, they're not on the committee, it's staff. So it doesn't seem like you're including, or they're necessarily including all the people who need to be included in this committee. So that's kind of what the status is now. On the positive side, it does seem that the conversation in this district has sparked some conversation in other districts as well. So just doing like a little search on the internet for the one that we were talking about led to this other result just a week later in a different district, kind of basically addressing the same issues. So it does seem to have sparked some conversation and hopefully some changes in some other districts as well. So I guess really at this point, our final question for you is, how do you think, based on what we've presented in terms of what the district has done so far in both immediate response and kind of more long-term initiatives, what do you think? Do you think that they're doing an adequate job? Do you think that they could have done? I mean, we're kind of leading you with that question because our
based on the Padlet, it seems like the class already had better ideas than what the district did.
You know what I find sad, and I don't really know the answer to this, but that 6-week course, why couldn't they give an in-service credit for it? Like an incentive? Like, is that that big of a deal?
They actually did do that. It was, they gave a 1 credit and teachers still chose not to do it.
I don't think it should be a voluntary thing. I think it should be mandatory.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think that it was made voluntarily, and then who really wants to put their extra time? I mean, we're already at school for so long, so many activities that we do. Everyone has their own life. So to volunteer something like that, I don't think many people are going to take it seriously. If they would have mandated and made it part of the day, however they figured it out, then it would have been a little bit, it would have showed more, it was more important. and people might have taken it a little more seriously.
What's the message behind the music if there was a poor turnout, poor enrollment from the staff? What's the message behind, what's the secret messages behind that?
That the staff doesn't really believe in it, that they're not willing to put the work in to change the community.
It's not.
But it also sends a message, I think, that the administration doesn't really believe in
Exactly.
it. Because they're not promoting it for the staff to be really involved in it.
So
There needs to be some sacrifice, I think. They need to bank in maybe an extra superintendent's conference day and make
That's
it,
that's exactly what I was
Get
gonna
in,
say. It
get
should be
in
a
the
conference
calendar.
day.
you know?
Could that have been the first strategy then?
Yeah.
Or one of the first strategies? You know, to a man with a hammer, every problem is a nail. And so I have a good idea. We'll run a course and we'll have a committee.
I hate that word. It's PTSD for me. A former committee. What's that gonna do? I'm sorry. I'm over that, but that's just me.
Well, that's why I added the little gif of that don't impress me much, because I just
Yeah,
thought
I
we
am
all
that
kind of
woman. I
agreed
am that woman.
it was not a good like response. And like that, the letter that this like superintendent wrote was pretty lame. Like
Yeah.
a
what
letter's
got
not
me
going to make
upset-
big change. It's not going to make like a big difference necessarily, but it's the tone. It's showing that you care. It's showing that you want to make an effort to change. And that letter was like the most lackluster thing I've ever read.
What got me
So I
more
was like,
upset about that letter was about the students too. You know, like they didn't have any care about the students, or they didn't acknowledge the students. It wasn't a student's first kind of solution. You know, it was the students that you know, look at the data right there, that the students didn't feel ready to enter this world of diversity and inclusion and the change. And it's, you know, featuring here about what's it's going to be, the diversity and inclusion will be changing, and it's going to be continuing to grow. So then I don't feel prepared. That's something there as well, that, you know, they're not acknowledging the students, upsetness about this.
And again, if you drop it, by the way, I thought that was Jean with the lipstick that was singing. It wasn't Jean. I thought it was Jean, the way she was holding. But at any rate, I happen to be a person who really believes in committees. But the problem is, and as I think I said to you in the first semester, when I asked you all, first class I met you, whether you thought that none of us is as smart as all of us, and most of you said, "Oh, that's true." And I said, "That's probably true unless everybody's stupid together." You can put 20 people with master's degrees and whatnots in a room, and they can be very stupid together, more than you can possibly realize. Although you probably have all the members of committees where a lot of people were really stupid together because no one knew how to be a truly effective committee, to be truly engaged. I put in the chat, I did this with you in the first semester, what I call the high engagement model. And I'm just going to just give you the words. And if you want know more about it, I'll be happy to comment to it maybe next week. If you want a group to be committed and to be highly engaged, you need all of those 7 factors by research. They all have to be there. And if they're not there, then the committee is a waste of time. They need to have power. They need to know what they can do and what they can't do. Suppose that committee turned around and said, hear ye, everyone's going to read a book about another ethnicity. We have spoken. And you can think of the yes buts to that right away. And by the way, would they have the authority to do that? Would that still rest with the principal or the chair or the superintendent? So that's a silly thing if you don't have that if you don't know what your power boundaries are. They need to know how to be in a group. They need to understand the issues from all sorts of corners, which is kind of what you're doing in alchemy for that matter. They need to have the information that this group has presented. They need to be able to pin down their goals, their purposes. They need to be able to think about all the things that group was, if I understood Jamie correctly, was going to do. There was a lot of things for that. Jamie, how many people in that group, in that committee?
Lynn, you could chime in too. I think about I would say 12 to 15.
Oh
Yeah, I was gonna say the same, maybe 15.
15.
Oh my, 12 people, 15 people are going to do all those things and make it effective? Okay, hold your breath on that, all right? So, but what you want to do is spread out the responsibility so that people get other people to do parts of the job rather than the whole job, so the more people get engaged. You need the resources. Suppose everybody decided to come back to Patricia's point a half hour ago, we need to bring courageous conversations in. Now I haven't got a clue what Courageous Conversations costs, and I don't think Patricia would know either, but it's got to cost a bunch of money. Will that district write the check to do that? They say, no,
Yes.
you do it. They will?
This
Oscar?
district,
Yes.
Yes, you're right. You're right about that. That you're right about. So you need the resources, and then what's the reward? Now think about this. I'm being very existential with all of you right now. If not a lot of people were signing up for the course that was offered, we concluded a few minutes ago that it wasn't a hot topic for a lot of people. It wasn't worth taking a half hour, an hour, a week after school. It wasn't. We don't see the need to do this. So if we're coming to that kind of conclusion, then what's the reward if they take the course besides the one credit that Callie mentioned in the other presentation? A lot of people don't need the credit.
you would hope they want to do it for their students. That would be
Hello. But if they didn't sign up for the course to begin with, Jamie.
no, then they're not going to. That's what we talked about in this committee. Then the change isn't going to happen.
Amen.
I also feel like it's like good to bring up, like, based on the last presentation, like everyone's a racist, right? Like I come from that opinion, but I know that like it's kind of a, you know, big thing. Like I get that that's something that is abrasive at first to like understand that, like, yes, as a white person, I was raised in a racist society. I am racist. I have racist like biases that I'm not aware of, whatever. But if you think about like the people in this school who maybe haven't had that like experience yet, and they don't necessarily realize that they have a problem that they have to solve, then they're going to say to themselves, I don't need to take that training because that's not me. That doesn't explain me. Like I'm a you know, progressive thinker and I'm not racist and I don't have a problem. And then if you think about the other side, I mean, obviously there's more than just two people on this spectrum, but I mean, if you think about the extreme person who's like, I'm not racist, I don't have a problem, I don't need that training, versus the person that maybe is racist and says, I don't care because I don't care, right? So like those are the two extremes that you have on your spectrum, maybe in the school. So it's kind of interesting to think about it from that like way as well. That like neither side thinks that they need the training. So
right. I agree with you because I didn't think I needed the training, and then when I went to the training, I realized how enlightened I was from it. I was like, I don't need this. I'm Hispanic. I love everybody, and it was so wrong. I needed that training.
So just to piggy off what Amy was saying, Amy, you weren't part of this committee, but at school, our district had formed a diversity and equity committee this year. And we pretty much worked in this committee all year long, once a month for 2 hours, or a little more than 2 hours a day. But what was interesting is that our assistants group decided who was part of this committee, and we were invited. Obviously, you're not going to turn down an invitation like that, but it was pretty much preaching to the choir, right? Like everybody who was there, he knew that we would be accepting of whatever the committee presented itself. He knew that we weren't the ones who were had a hard time accepting diversity, let's just say. So we really were kind of bothered by the fact that we were picked to be in this part of this committee. I mean, there was about 17 or 18 professionals in this committee, and we're like, this is a waste of time because you should have picked Mr. So-and-so in the English class who refuses, or who had a sign at one time, you know, make America great, whatever it was, you know, when he won the election. Like, where are those people? But they deliberately chose not to invite those people in the committee, which to me, it was a waste of time for me. Because another thing is like, you know, they were like, he's like, you guys are going to be the spearheader. You guys are going to push this through the building. And I'm like, what is a social worker going to do? Where are my administrators? Where's my assistant principal in all of this? Can't they learn anything? They can't take away anything, nothing productive. They don't feel like they're going to take anything away from this committee. So I kind of felt this diversity equity committee was kind of just on paper. And at the end of it all, I don't really think anything came of it.
Hello. But you had a committee.
Oh yeah.
What do you think about that, Dr. B? Like, should the committee get picked, or should the staff decide who's going to be, like, who should decide who's going to be on the committee? I'm just curious to know what you would say.
I'd probably silently reach out to some folks who I thought would influence other people, in truth, but I would leave it open. I would have it open.
Our committee was, you know, district staff members, teachers, people, personnel, but I felt like it was just preaching to the choir. Like he knew exactly everyone who he picked were people who work with students who did not have a problem with diversity. And like we said, we were all like, okay, let's be uncomfortable with this discussion. I'm okay with being uncomfortable. Like, is there bias? Probably, that I'm unaware of, and I can probably learn a few things. But it was kind of like the people that he picked. I was like, this is a waste. This is just to look good on paper.
The rubber stamp, and it was a rubber stamp, number one. Number two, with no real authority. Remember, I go back to power as the number one variable in high engagement. If you don't have any real power to do anything, why are you doing it? And we've all been part. I've led committees like that, and I've been part of committees like that from before any of you were born. Trust me on this too. You have no idea how hard it is for me not to tell war stories, but I'm not going to waste your time on that.
You know, because we talk about change, you know, and that we want change, but are we how committed are we to that, making that change? You know,
I have a definition for you, Teresita, and you can disagree or agree with it. My idea of change is enabling a new way to think, to realize, a new way to realize. And it's easy to talk about, but you've got to know how to play the symbols to make that work through. And Patricia said, I didn't think I needed to be on that committee or that training. She came out with new ways to realize.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't do that with snapping your finger. They come from careful planning and thinking all the way through. The metaphor I like to use, and I can't even download something to my iPhone to play music. I have trouble with those kinds of things lately. None of you I don't think, are music teachers, but most of you probably know a heck of a lot more about music than I. I would equate it to a jazz ensemble, not an orchestra, but a jazz ensemble, where in a jazz ensemble, people, play instruments and make music together on the fly. They're creating from within and as a whole with a W, because they've got the skills and they recognize the need to do that. Orchestras have orchestra leaders who point to the violins and the flutes and say, play those notes. Two different things. Very good. Thank you so much. We're going to take a 10-minute break. So we're going to come back at 5:28. We'll go from there. Great job. Thank you very much, both groups.